I remember, Mom. I was inspired by a recent story posted to share my story. I want to establish, none of this is fabricated. Start to finish is my reality. It is the weight I carry on a daily basis. It is what keeps me awake at night. It is also why I am the man that I am today. It's hard to see the silver lining in living in a nightmare, but understanding that good can come from the darkness is the first step to accepting and growing as a person. I hope some of you feel empowered by my tale. I pray that my story inspires you to take the next step in healing whatever darkness follows you. Please, take care of yourselves. I was 6 when my mother met him. See, my mother and father got divorced when I was only 2, so I never knew my biological father. My mother was a RN working long hours, so I lived with my grandparents. My grandfather stepped up to the plate and provided me with the same opportunities he had provided his children. He supplied a loving, supportive home for me to flourish. His other children had went on and thrived. One son was a software engineer, one worked for the federal government, one married early and worked to support her growing family. My mother was always the one at the butt of their jokes. She worked hard, and came to visit when she could. I had a positive relationship with my mother. On weekends she'd take me to the Kmart food court and we'd share a large chili cheese fries, and she'd ask what I'd learned in school, how I was doing, etc. I don't blame my mother for what happened to us. She, like all other adults, sought out love. She found this man through mutual friends and they hit it off rather quickly. He was kind and courteous to my mother. He would come and watch sporting events with my grandfather and I. It had seemed that my mother had found love, after all. Soon they moved into a house together and my mom asked if I would like to live with them. I agreed, since a very good friend of mine lived right up the street and it would make it easier to trade Pokemon between our copies of Red and Blue. For a while we functioned like a normal family. Slowly my mother picked up more and more shifts at work. I rarely saw my mother and I spent all of my afternoons alone with this man. My mother noticed my loneliness and bought me a dog, a black and white mixed breed. Me being 6 and seeing the coat of black and white, decided to name him Oreo. I raised that dog from 6 weeks old all the way to his untimely death. The violence started out light. He would smack me and my mother when we would disobey his orders or talk back. His demeanor grew darker and darker the longer they were together. Soon I was being hogtied and left in my room for hours on end while my mother was working late. I could hear them fighting from my bedroom. Their screams were my white noise. I could see their shadows, his hand raised above his head as my mother cowered below him. I could hear the smack as his hand connected with her cheek. I could hear her sobs, and I remember her coming into my room before she would retreat to her bedroom and putting on a happy face to tell me she loved me. It didn't take long before my mother found out she was carrying his child. I remember the fear on her face at the realization she was trapped. His violence quickly shifted to me, being unable to hit my now pregnant mother. I remember the sleeve of tattoos that ran down his arm to his hands where he held a gun pointed at my head. He would tell me how he could end my life right there and that no one would miss me. My mother gave birth to my sister. It didn't take long for the violence to begin again. I remember her blood-curdling screams as he dragged her to the basement by her hair. I remember vaguely hearing sobs from beneath my bedroom. I remember holding my newborn sister rocking in my room while he tormented my mother below us. I remember him coming upstairs to grab me and tell me he'd slit my throat if I told anyone about this. My mother was slowly leaving us. Piece by piece her soul and mind were failing her. She was blocking out the horrors to put on a show for me. I remember her spending extra dollar to get mac and cheese in special shapes for me. I remember him throwing her face first through a wall for wasting money. I remember him dragging me outside alongside my dog, Oreo, and beating him with a lead pipe until he lay crippled on the ground in front of me. I remember my tears soaking the earth in front of me. I remember him unsheathing a machete and saying it was the humane thing to do as he swung the blade down into my dog's neck. I remember burying the dog I loved so much in front of the large oak tree in the backyard. He told my mom the dog ran away, and I told her the same. One day a police officer pulled my mom over. I remember watching her sob onto the officer's shoulder from the back of the squad car. I remember walking into a room at the police station with a man sitting facing away from me. I remember him telling me he was my dad. Piece by piece my grandparents' plan fell into place. Removing me from the house woke my mother from her haze, and it didn't take long for her to call the police. He's still in prison for what he did to my mother. I spent years in therapy learning to cope with the horrors I had seen. My mother for a brief period shared her story with the world, talking at marches and rallies for domestic abuse survivors. Sadly, her past caught up to her. She used drugs and alcohol to cope, and soon we had lost her completely. Today, I am 24 years old. My sister is graduating soon and lives with me. I have a loving wife. I have 2 boys of my own. My mother resides in an assisted living home. She doesn't remember what happened all those years ago. She doesn't remember who I or my sister are. She doesn't remember the names of her grandchildren. It's painful to see her and have her retreat from my presence as if I were a stranger, but it's a blessing in disguise. She no longer cries. She no longer hurts. She's no longer scared. This is the burden I carry. The weight on my shoulders is heavy beyond compare. I've learned to live with my demons. The nightmares have left, but the memories have not. I imagine that I took my mother's memories and put them into my own head. Rest easy, Mom. You may have forgot, but I remember for both of us. Birthday photos? As a baby, I had multiple health problems. I couldn't be outside for too long because the sun was toxic to my skin. My parents kept me inside for the entirety of the first 2 years of my life. My mother always stayed home to care for me, and my father always traveled for work. None of this really affects me now. Aside from a few chronic illnesses, I feel mostly fine, and I barely remember any of the years I was kept inside my house. On my first birthday, I was alone with my mother. My father was on a plane back from Europe to celebrate with us. My mother got a phone call. The plane crashed. Only 4 people died. My dad was one of them. My mother became nearly bedridden. She did not leave the house at all. The only time she said she showed any happiness was when she would play with me and care for me. Again, I remember none of this. I was literally only 365 days old. I don't remember my father at all. But in that moment, my mother's whole world died. My family on both sides were able to help financially during this time. I still was very sick and could not even sit next to a window without getting hurt, so we needed lots of help. Somehow, we made it through this time, and the day after my second birthday, my mother searched for job interviews in the area. It was the first grown person she's interacted with since her husband died a year prior. She got a very nice job working at home. She made good money so she could pay for my medical bills yet still make time for me personally. I'm 19 now, and my mom died about a month ago. Brain cancer. Who would have guessed that I would outlive both of my parents? Especially with the condition I was in when I was born. I was able to move in with other family members, and I'm feeling mostly alright. Well, almost. I was looking through old photos to put into a commemorative album for her at her funeral. I came across pictures she took during the year when she was alone with me. Even though I know she was always so sad at that time, she always looked so happy to be with me. The reason I'm writing this here is because I found a photo of my second birthday party. I put party in air quotes because it was just me, my mother, a cake, and that's about it. The picture showed me and my mother sitting at one end of the table. There was a cake with 2 candles sticking out of it on my plate. I sat in my high chair with a semi-confused expression while my mother hugged me tightly. There was another person in the picture. He was holding the camera back at himself and taking the picture like a selfie. He had captured the whole image. The only problem was that he had died a year before. My dead dad was taking a picture of my mother and I on my second birthday. Breath. About a week ago I started to feel a bit strange. Some may call it malaise, others may call it depression. Whatever it was, I noticed a complete flattening in my emotions. I couldn't feel happy. I couldn't feel sad. I felt nothing. About a week ago I remember waking up and staring at the ceiling for what felt like a few seconds. I knew it was around 9:00 a.m. when I woke up, but when I checked the clock after staring at the ceiling it was almost 7 p.m. I looked at the clock in disbelief, but eventually shrugged it off. The next day, I was exhausted. I stayed up all night because I didn't want to feel I had missed out on my day. I was still feeling this flattening of emotions, but chalked it up to not eating well enough. I decided I would make myself some lunch to try and feel better. I was pulling some items out of the fridge to make a sandwich, and as I went to grab the package of honey ham, I felt an intense sharp pain on the tips of my fingers as I touched the top of the package. I jumped back and recoiled my hand into my chest. I was a bit afraid to look at my hand, let alone look at whatever caused the pain. I sheepishly looked at my fingers, but nothing was there. I checked the package of honey ham, and again, nothing there. I figured I got a static shock or something and moved on. A few days later I woke up in the morning and felt pain in my hand. It wasn't a sharp pain, but more so like a dull aching pain. I thought maybe I slept on it wrong, and continued throughout my day. The continued feeling of flattened emotions hadn't gone away, and I wondered if something was wrong with me. I did some light work at home such as cleaning the kitchen and scooping the cat's litter box, but I had to stop after the pain in my hand got worse. I took some pain medication and took a nap. This was around noon. When I woke up, the pain in my hand had moved up my forearm and into my shoulder. It almost felt like the muscles sitting on top of my bones was rotting. I couldn't move. I started to sob as the pain pulsated and shot from my shoulder down to my hand, and back up again. I checked my phone and stared in disbelief. It was 11 o'clock at night. 4 days later, I had texts and missed calls from family and friends, and my boss had left me an angry voicemail saying not to bother coming in for my shift from yesterday. Shit, I thought. This was the least of my worries. I drew a bath and poured some Epsom salt in to soak my arm. I laid down in the bath and whimpered as I lowered my arm into the water. I laid there for a few minutes until I heard something scratching at the door. The cat must want to come in, I figured. I ignored it for a while but started to hear something breathing in a low tone outside the door. It's hard to describe. It sounded like heavy breathing from a grown man, but the tone beneath the breath sounded like something demonic. I froze. The lights clicked off. The power didn't go out. It sounded like someone flipped the light switch off. I laid completely still in the water as I contemplated what was happening. I heard the doorknob start to twist, and the door slowly creep open. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I pressed my eyes shut and started to shake. The low breathing started to come closer into the bathroom. Across the floor. I could feel it on my face. I passed out in the water. I woke up shivering cold. The lights were on in the bathroom, and the door was still shut. My skin had turned a purplish hue and I couldn't stop shaking. I jumped out of the bath and clenched my arm as the pain progressed to unbearable proportions. I looked down at my arm and became nauseous as I saw my veins had turned black. The skin on my arm was numb, but the rotting feeling in my muscles was intense. I left the bathroom and called my parents, my friends, and a couple co-workers to let them know what was going on. They told me to go to the ER immediately, but they brushed off my experience with whatever thing was breathing in my bathroom. My parents told me they would meet me at the ER. I got to the hospital and my mom was crying. I asked my dad what was going on, and all he had to say was, "We're going to get the help you need, son." I agreed something needed to happen. I couldn't bear the pain anymore. The nurse took my vital signs, and I asked what could cause my veins to turn black. Should I be worried? I asked. "We're going to take good care of you," she said. The nurse left the room as I waited for the doctor. My mom couldn't hold it together and left the room. I told my dad I think something was in my house, and I'm afraid to go back. He looked frozen, and didn't respond to me. "Dad?" I called out. Nothing. I felt chills spread across my body as I saw all of the color leave my dad's face. He was sitting perfectly still, looking just beyond my eyes. It seemed as if he was looking at something directly behind me. I turned my head around and saw nothing. As I turned back to face my dad, the lights flicked off. I heard the sound of the same breathing from my bathroom, a low, deep growl hiding just beneath the sound of the breath. It sounded like it was coming from the corner of the room directly adjacent to me. "Dad." I spoke out softly. I froze again. The sound crept closer to me and I could feel it moving up my legs and onto my face. It smelled like rotting flesh. I passed out again. I woke up in a hospital bed with my arms and legs strapped down, The doctor was in the room with my parents. "You gave us quite a scare," the doctor exclaimed. My mom's face was red from crying. "We're going to hold you here for a while until we know you will be safe around yourself and others." What? I thought to myself as I blankly stared at the doctor. The doctor ushered my parents out of the room and left me alone in the bright white room. One of the straps was loose around my hand. The pain in my arm was gone. They must have given me something. I wiggled myself free from the straps and cracked open the door. No one was there. I ran out of the room into a smaller room down the hall. The lights just flicked off again.